Hello! In this video I'm going to look at a phone call between Chris Watts and his parents and at the way Cindy Watts, his mum, relates to him. This call was recorded in November 2018 after his sentencing in August. It was the first time he'd spoken to them since pleading guilty in court to murdering Shanann and his two daughters Bella and Cece. And it was before his interview in February, 3 months later, where he talked in detail about how he murdered his family.
Hey, hello. Hey, Chris, what's up? What's up? Hey, I get mom. She's back here. Her Kelly's whole week.
Hi.
Hey, so you can jack it off.
Hey, sweetheart.
Hey.
Hey.
What you doing?
How you doing?
I'm okay.
Are you really?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Where are you?
I'm solo County.
Still in the same place?
Yeah, still in the same place.
Okay. Okay. Oh, darling.
It feels strange that after these two quick questions about Chris, his mother goes on for over 2 minutes about the family's reputation.
I did not know you didn't receive our letter till a few days ago.
I'm sorry, just like,
Had no idea.
you don't need to like overnight stuff because they still have to like, go through it.
And there's some bad stuff coming out. And I think there's really a lot of bad stuff that Frankie and Sandy and everyone has said about us. Really bad. But we're going to deal about it. We'll deal with it. But they said your dad has substance. Here, tell them. Oh, no, you tell them.
Okay, well, they're just saying a bunch of stuff that's not true.
Yeah, a lot of stuff that's not true. And
We're just going to let them do what they want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now. There's like stuff that was said before or stuff like now? No, stuff that was evidently some things from the past, whatever, but they're saying substance abuse from me and Jamie moving in and out and all this stuff. She was a rebel and stuff like that. Oh my God.
He sounds genuinely concerned, doesn't he?
no telling whatever else.
Was it stuff like was going on in the case before or stuff they just like are saying now?
Actually, just 4 months later, Chris Watts said in an interview things that were similar or worse than the things his mum was so upset about in this phone conversation. So he talked about how his sister was a rebel and would move in and out. He talked about how difficult his mum was in his relationship with Shanann. He's actually made things worse for their reputation. He was never interested in their reputation, and yet his mum seems oblivious to the kind of person he really is.
We don't know. They're going to go on CNN Wednesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and with the DA. And they're going to just say, I don't know what they're going to say. Frankie's been saying things on his Facebook that we've just only begun, and I don't know what that means. And Jamie's been getting threatening emails and phone calls. And these people are crazy. Some of these people are crazy, but I've got I've got so much support from so many people. I just wish you would have
let them deal with it.
This is the first time they've spoken since the sentencing, since he's gone down, and he's been told he will be in prison for the rest of his life. And yet she's spending most of the first 2 minutes of their conversation just talking about how she and her family are being viewed by the public. It gives us an idea about how their relationship works, that she goes to Chris to meet her own emotional needs. Is this how it was when he was little too? Someone who becomes a narcissist will have learnt in childhood that if they can live up to this thing that they can do, if they can consistently do it and please that parent, then they will be loved. Cindy's reputation was also what was at the forefront of her mind when she watched the recent Netflix documentary about the murders. This is what she said to the Sun newspaper. People keep coming up with all these narratives. None of it is true. I'm living it, and I have been living it every single day for 2 years. It's nothing he hasn't lived through. He saw it. They didn't even show all the conversations that Christopher had with his dad. They didn't show anything. There was so much left out. Ronnie and I watched it on Saturday night. I was shocked to see videos that I thought were private of Shanann and the kids showing me on the slip and slide in the backyard. These are things that are private. Everything doesn't have to be documented. I would have preferred those not to be in there, but they were, and there's nothing I can do about it. Other than one sentence where she says she thinks of her grandchildren a lot, this was all Cindy Watts had to say about that documentary. So in other words, she was saying, my son isn't who you think he is, and I'm horrified that I was shown going down a slide in one of the videos. That's what she has to say about a documentary about the murders of her grandchildren and daughter-in-law. So again, her focus is on her reputation and on the reputation of her family. Cindy Watts to me seems like a very narcissistic person, and I've made videos about her in the past looking more closely at her behaviour and looking at narcissistic traits that seem apparent in the way she speaks. It seems that this is her priority, that really this comes before anything.
Stuff wasn't happening though.
I know, honey. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
But it's clear it does matter because she's just spent all this time talking about it.
Hey, don't worry about us.
Don't worry about us.
Just take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself and
Don't
be
worry about
safe.
you.
Please be safe.
Everything.
Please be safe, because I just can't deal with this.
Okay.
If you're not safe,
You'll be safe, honey.
I just want you to be safe.
It's natural you'd want your child to be safe, and prison is a dangerous place, but he hasn't ended up there because he hasn't paid some parking fines. It just seems a bit bizarre to me that there's such a focus on his safety that his mother says it 5 times. It also seems to me that excessively going on and on about it might be her showing that she's a good, loving parent at a time where that view of herself might be under threat. Because this is when she might otherwise be questioning herself as a parent. But if she acts in a really, really loving and concerned way, she might be able to not have to face those fears about herself.
And I think in time he will tell me.
Probably nothing you ever would have imagined you would have faced.
Never. Never. No, and not from the son that I raised and Ronnie raised and our children, you know, we just did everything for them. We worked for them. We wanted them to have a good life, good education, and we stressed education. I mean, I feel too much. I mean, I definitely feel everything way too much and have a conscience that I just feel way too much.
In other words, if you think my son is a psychopath, you should know that I'm not. I'm a really good person.
Your Honor, initially, they've asked me and they're hoping that they have the strength to speak, but if they do not, they've written out their statements and asked me to finish for them. So
That would be fine. Who would like to go first?
if I could start, Your Honor.
I don't agree with anything. I don't agree with anything that woman said that day. She talked off the top of her head.
This is what she doesn't agree with.
On behalf of the Watts, Your Honor, and to the community, we come today as the grandparents and the parent of the daughter and children whose life was taken in this case. We are not here to ask for leniency. We are not in any way condoning or tolerating the crime that has occurred and the pain that has been caused. We appreciate the consideration that everyone has paid, most especially the families that have lost everyone. We appreciate that they begged for Christopher's life.
I didn't care about the death penalty. Nobody's going to die in Colorado.
The prosecution in this case has in fact respected the Victim Bill of Rights. They took the time to explain that the information that my clients had at the time that they were interviewed was not correct. They were misinformed. They were searching for answers. They were not intending to cause any pain to anyone.
When I watched this speech at the time, I remember feeling some relief because Cindy Watts had been on TV slating Shanann.
And he said that they have been talking about divorce, that they are not compatible anymore, and he was not happy anymore. And I finally thought, he's finally seen the light. She always said a lot of things about Chris in front of me that I didn't like. He looks like a skater boy. Look at his hair. Look how much stuff he puts on his hair. It was just on and on and on, and I just got a bad feeling.
And they got married in 2012. Did they get married in North Carolina?
They did. Mm-hmm.
How was that?
We didn't attend.
Really?
Mm-mm. We didn't attend because Shanann and I just couldn't get along.
We don't think that there's anything that he can say that will ever account for his behavior.
Everything was manipulated, and we were intimidated, and all of that stuff.
Well, it wasn't our story.
It wasn't our story.
What does she mean by being manipulated? A victim impact statement is supposed to be from victims of a crime. It's supposed to be about how the crime has affected them. Maybe the threat was that they couldn't make the speech if it was just a supportive speech about how great their son is and how much they love and adore him, which is what it mostly ended up being.
I have known you since the day you were born into this world. I have watched you grow from a quiet and sweet, curious child who Bella reminded me so much of, to a young man who worked hard in sports and later mechanics to achieve your goals. You are a good friend, brother, father, and son. We have loved you from the beginning, and we still love you now.
Most of the time Cindy Watts spent talking, she was talking about how much she loves her son. There was no apology to the Ruzeks for the way she'd slated their daughter. And she spent less time talking about her grandchildren and mentioning Shanann. And yet she sees herself, it seems, as a victim of the court. What she said in court also indicates that she did believe that Chris Watts had murdered his family.
This might be hard for some to understand, how I can sit here under these circumstances and tell you, although we are heartbroken, although we can't imagine what could have led us to this day. But we love you. Maybe you can't believe it either. As the Lord said in Jeremiah 3:31, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore, I have continued my faithfulness to you. And we love you. And we forgive you, son.
At the time, I thought all of this was really inappropriate, especially because she'd only mentioned Shanann in one sentence. I didn't think it was respectful of the Ruzeks to say all of this at this time, and that there would have been a better time to tell him all this. But watching it back, I can't help but feel moved. She does seem to be in a lot of pain. And even though she's very bitter and cruel, in my opinion, towards Shanann, having to face what her son did must have been agonising.
What that lady said, Jean said that day, was not what we said.
We didn't say anything that she said, and it broke our hearts.
When Jean said that we accepted that you did it and all that stuff.
No, we did not. We never did. All we wanted to do was get in the courtroom and give our statement, tell you how much we loved you.
It looks like she's now gone back to being in denial. My feeling is that rather than blaming her son for what happened, which would have to mean that she would feel that shame of her son having done such a terrible crime, where did she go wrong as a mother? Rather than having to put herself through any of that, she used Shanann as a scapegoat. And she talked horribly about her on TV. And now she's using the court as a scapegoat and she's blaming them. And her son seems to be doing the same thing. Encouraged by his parents, he's blaming the justice system for the fact that he's still in jail.
I just want to get out of here. I want to get, I know that God has a plan for me. It's to be in prison right now, but not stay here. Because he brought me here for a reason. But he also wants me to do something on the outside. I know I just can't sit here and just wait. But she questioned me for hours. And after those hours of interrogation, she puts me on a polygraph. And I didn't question about it. I just believe what she said that they said I made it. But I know for a fact she said you did pretty good. But I think we get some more out of them. I'm just like, I'll only think about this stuff way after it happens.
They did not administer the polygraph in the proper way. We can talk more about that later.
Yeah.
This is a recording I found on YouTube, so I can't be sure that this is him. His voice sounds a bit different from usual here, which is why I've said that we can't be sure that it's him. But we also know that he can behave like a chameleon. We've seen in other videos the way he will imitate people who have an influence over him. So he was sounding like Nicole Kessinger and saying like every few moments in the police interviews. So maybe he's now trying to sound like his jailmates. For Chris Watts and his mother to be using the justice system as a scapegoat, they don't just have to be entitled, they also need to be living in a fantasy world. And Chris Watts is fueling his mother's fantasy world as he does his. And his mother seems to be fueling his because she's believing everything he says. She's seeing him as a victim and giving him so much attention and admiration.
Your mom has been fighting for you. I have been on channel 7, channel 9 in Denver, the Denver Post, everybody. All right, now let him talk. Okay.
She seems to be sure of who her son is. There's this misconstrued version of his personality. She thinks of him as someone who's going to support her because I think he's probably done that in a mechanical way since childhood. He's done that because it's been something he has to do to get his narcissistic supply from his mum, which would have been the closest thing to love. And this certainty about who he is, despite how he's just behaved, despite all the obvious evidence that he isn't who she's decided he is, reminds me of the way that she wouldn't stop speaking throughout the conversation, that really the conversation was almost all her talking. And it seems like she's not really interested in listening. She's decided who Chris is and what it is about him that, that she needs to see. When a relationship revolves around you, it's pretty hard to get to know who the other person actually is because it's not relevant to you.
And he was a good kid. He was a perfect teenager, tell you the truth. He did not even rebel.
Once Chris Watts understood the script and understood he needed to act like this person who was really nurturing and made someone feel really special, then he would be loved. And that is who he had to be. Even though behaving like that wouldn't have come naturally to him, I don't think, because how can you care about other people if you've never been known and cared for yourself? If you've been cared for only if you pretend to be someone you're not? So I think that that's how he learnt to be. And now here he is as an adult, having dropped that mask and having acted on his rage that had built up for all those years, I believe, because he was never known for who he really was. And he would have felt that in order to get love, he had to be fake. So it's natural that you'd have a lot of resentment and eventually rage over that. And so here he is now, having been his real self and murdered his family, and the world hating him and facing punishment for the rest of his life, being taken apart from the world, you know, from his old life, and made to feel like a monster, because only monsters get sentenced for the rest of their lives. And I'm not saying that I believe people are monsters, but more that that's how the media tends to see them. And then there's his mum on the phone, still seeing him for his mask, you know, ignoring reality and giving him lots of praise and attention for somebody he isn't. And so how tempting would it be to just fall back into that role? And it seems that that's what he's doing. He does it on the phone to his mum, he does it on the call with this other person, assuming that this is him.
I know that, you know, God can lead me on how to write this thing up to get it back.
He is this godly person. He's been wronged because he's such a good person and people haven't realised it yet. That's why he's still in jail. And here's his mum backing him up, backing up this version of him that's never really existed. Now, after Chris Watts has talked in detail about how he murdered his family, his mother told the Sun newspaper he's heartbroken. But to be heartbroken for anyone but himself, he'd have to be able to feel empathy. And there's no evidence he can do that. Will his mother ever see him for who he is? In my opinion, Chris Watts is a narcissist, and I've talked about this in several videos. I've talked about why that is, the evidence that we can see that show us that he is. And beyond that, I think he's also a sociopath. Emotional neglect can have a real impact on who they become, because they learn to be whoever it is that gets positive attention, while their real selves get neglected. And that's how they separate from who they are, and how they lose their ability to empathise with people, because they're not in touch with who they are and how they really feel. They're living in a fantasy world. He has cut off from empathy and from being a real person in life and being able to have real relationships with people.
There's nothing that would have predicted any of this could have ever happened.
Yeah.
Nothing in his childhood at all. I would have never in a million years thought something like this could happen to him at all. But I would like to know what triggered it. How can a normal young man, and he's normal, he was normal, but he wasn't evaluated when he came into the system. He wasn't normal if he did this.
It must be bewildering.
It's bewildering to me. It is. It is absolutely. How does this happen? How did this happen? And I go back in my mind thinking, was there something I didn't pick up with on Chris? But I can't think of anything except he was quiet.
In the next video, I'm going to analyse some examples of Chris Watts manipulating his parents. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.